Good morning, guys. In this lesson we're going to be using multipliers to make percentage calculations, and in a few minutes I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by a multiplier. Before we start, it's very important that you have access to a calculator. So if you don't actually have a physical calculator on you, well, there are ways around this. Whatever device you're using to watch this video, so if you've got a laptop or a phone or anything like that, if you Google calculator, a calculator will pop up on your screen. So on a computer or a tablet, you can get a calculator. Similarly, if you do have a phone, all phones have a calculator built into them as an app. So if you look hard enough for that, you will find a calculator. So hopefully we should all have access to a calculator in some way. Okay, so if 100% represents one whole, so one unit, what happens if I divide both of these quantities by 2? Well, half of 100% is 50% and half of 1 is 0.5. What happens if I do this again? So what's half of 50%? What happens when I divide 50% by 2? Well, I would get 25%, and 0.5 divided by 2 gives me 0.25. Alright, what happens, let's say, if I divide by 5? So 0.25 divided by 5 gives me 0.05, and 25% divided by 5 gives me 5%. I'm going to ask you a question now. I'm going to ask you, how do all these values on the left in blue, how do they all link to the blue numbers on the right hand side of your screen? So how do these decimals link to these percentages? So pause the video if you need some time to think. So what I'm looking for is the fact that all these numbers on the right are just 100 times greater than all the numbers on the left. So for example, to get from 0.5 to 50, all I've done, I've multiplied it by 100. We can generalize. We can say to convert from a decimal number to its equivalent percentage, we just multiply that number by 100. This works in the opposite way as well. To get from 50% to its equivalent decimal, I just divide that number 50 by 100, so I can say that 50% is the same as 0.5. And we can generalize. To convert from a percentage to a decimal, all we do is just divide that number by 100. For task 1 today, you need to use this fact. So to get from a percentage to a decimal, just divide it by 100. On the worksheet that I've attached for you, please can you find task 1 and work your way through it. Don't spend any longer than 5 or 10 minutes on it, please. And then your solutions are attached. So here are your answers to task 1. Okay, so find 37% of 60. So we're moving on now. In earlier lessons, we looked at ways we could do these types of problems without a calculator, but today we're going to be looking at a quick way to learn this with a calculator. Okay. So in maths, this word of, very often it means multiply. So this question is effectively 37% times by 60. But we know from task 1 how to write a percentage as a decimal. 37%, think about it. How do I get from a percentage to a decimal? Well, I just divide it by 100. So 37 divided by 100 gives me 0.37. So to find 37% of 60, all I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my calculator and I'm going to work out 0.37 times by 60. My answer is 22.2. Something very special about that decimal number that we've used to calculate this question. This is called a percentage multiplier. Okay, so this decimal equivalent of the percentage, that's what we mean by a multiplier. And to find a percentage of an amount, all we do, we use the percentage multiplier. So percentage multiplier is the decimal equivalent of the percentage that you're trying to find. So if you're looking to find 37% of a number, all you're going to do, you're just going to multiply it by 0.37. Please could you pause the video and have a go at finding 41% of 90 and by using a percentage multiplier method. So use your calculator. So what calculation is going to get me to 41% of 90? Well, remember what we said, that word of in maths, it very often just means multiply. So we need to do 41% times by 90. I'm going to take my percentage multiplier. So instead of 41%, what's the decimal equivalent? To get from a percentage to a decimal, remember I divide it by 100, so that tells me that 0.41 multiplied by 90 gives me 36.9. So this is my answer, and 0.41, that is my percentage multiplier. So whatever percentage you're trying to find, just divide it by 100 to get that decimal equivalent, and then multiply it by that original number. Okay, so on your worksheet, please can you find task 2? So for these questions, it's not even looking for the answer. What you need to do, you have to write down the calculation. So for example, if I wanted to find 34% of 60, what would I type into my calculator to work this out? So you don't even need to give me the answer. I'm more interested in the calculations. And here are your solutions. Okay, so how else can I use these multipliers? Well, multipliers give you a quick way of increasing a number by a particular percentage. So let's say I was trying to increase a number by 62%. So I'm going to draw this problem out so I can visualize it. So let's say my original number is 100%. If I want to increase it by 62%, that means add on 62% to my original number. So do we see from this diagram that if I'm increasing a number by 62%, that's effectively saying find 162% of your original number, because 100 add 62 gives me 162. So increasing a number by 62% is the same as finding 162% of the number. So this means that whatever number I'm starting off with, if I multiply it by 1.62, okay, so to get from 162 to my decimal, I divide it by 100. If I multiply it by this number, I will increase it by 62%. So this is my answer to the question, and I'm just going to show you how you would use this. So for example, if I wanted to increase 20 by 62%, I would take my calculator, I would type in 20 multiplied by 1.62, and that gives me 32.4. Okay, so please can you pause the video and tell me what multiplier would you use to increase a number by 94%? Okay, so let's visualize the problem. So let's say my original number is 100%. If I want to increase it by 94%, it means I need to add on an extra 94%. Do we see that increasing a number by 94%, it's just the same as finding 194% of that original number? So if I'm looking for my percentage multiplier, I have it as a percentage now. A percentage multiplier means write it as a decimal. So how do I get from 194% to that decimal equivalent? Well, I need to divide it by 100. So thinking back to task 1, I'm taking this percentage and dividing it by 100. So that tells me that my multiplier is 1.94. So this is my answer. But just as an example, how would I use this multiplier? Well, for example, if I wanted to increase 20 by 94%, I would do 20 multiplied by 1.94, and that would give me an answer of 38.8. So 1.94 is my answer to this question. Okay, so could you find your next task on your worksheet, please? So for all of these questions, it's just saying what would you times a number by? So for example, in the first one, it's like what would you times a number by if you wanted to increase it by 50%, and so on. Okay, so your solutions are on the worksheet, and if you find you've finished quite quickly today, there is also a challenge task for you if that interests you. Alright, so please just get in contact if you have any questions, and I'll be more than happy to help. Thanks very much, guys.